Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria. Sometimes I think about old videos that I've done on a topic and I reflect and I deepen my understanding of that particular topic, and I have breakthroughs that I didn't have before in terms of understanding some aspect, some nuance that wasn't clear to me before. And that's happened to me again recently. I was thinking about a video that I did a little while ago about magic in the Bible, which also covered divination in the Bible. Essentially looking at the misconception which comes from the King James translation of the Bible that all forms of magic and all forms of divination are forbidden in the Bible, and actually looking at examples of where, in particular, divination is used in several contexts within the Bible. And yet there are other forms of divination which seem to be forbidden in the first 5 books. Even though, according to the same Christians that say all of these things are evil witchcraft, the law has been superseded by Jesus, they seem to cherry pick these bits of the law which say that, all witchcraft is evil. So it's interesting. It's almost as though the prejudice was already there and they were just looking for some kind of spiritual way of justifying it. But anyway, and so the mainstream religious position on magic and divination and the supposedly biblical justifications for those are confusing and inconsistent. So I wasn't satisfied with the mainstream religious views on divination with all of its inconsistencies. I decided to do some contemplation and try and get to the bottom of what the true biblical position is on divination and different forms of divination. Much of Western esotericism is based in the Jewish or Christian forms of mysticism, and so I think it's important to find a grounding for many of those later Western esoteric beliefs in the source material. So that's what I've been trying to do, thinking about this question of divination in the Bible. There are several examples of divination in the Bible, which I've gone through in my previous video on magic in the Bible. The most notable form of divination, of course, is the Urim and Thummim stones that were used by the priest to find out what God's will was in a particular situation. And another notable appearance of divination in the Bible, which I didn't mention in my previous video on that topic, was in the book of Acts, actually, from the New Testament this time, where when Judas was no longer one of the 12 disciples, the disciples needed to select a new disciple to replace him. And in order to do that, they engaged in a practice known as the casting of lots. This would be similar to throwing a pair of dice. It's sometimes used with bones or something of that nature. This is clearly a form of divination and resembles forms of divination that were used in pagan societies, including by the Mongols and similar kinds of societies. So then, what is it that makes one form of divination okay, while another form of divination is not okay? As I was considering this question, I looked at the forms of divination that were forbidden in the first 5 books of the Bible. And one of the forms involves using the entrails of animals, as depicted in the Exodus Gods and Kings movie, and also depicted in the HBO series Rome, quite common in a number of pagan societies. And I thought, and there is some rabbinical kind of interpretation to this effect, I thought because it involved animal entrails, there was an element of uncleanness, physical uncleanness that came into the act, which is why it was a forbidden act. This would seem to be a part of it, but that doesn't explain other forms of divination that are forbidden which aren't unclean, such as auguries, that is to say, watching birds flying through the sky and reading that as a sign. None of this has uncleanness attached to it. perhaps it is also a pagan practice, and therefore it is something that is forbidden for that reason, kind of like wearing a different team's jersey at a football game. But that still doesn't seem like enough for me. That seems like a capricious reason to ban certain forms of divination. There obviously must be some reason that certain forms of divination are banned that revolve around those forms of divination making the relationship with the divine or God imperfect in some way. I've also been thinking about astrology versus the observation of the planetary bodies and how those themes emerge in the Book of Enoch, 1 Enoch, which I hope to do a video on shortly. Thinking about some of that, and also thinking about the role of fate or destiny in pagan societies, and ruminating over all of that, I think I've come up with an answer for what makes certain forms of divination undesirable. And I think it has to do with the question of, well, it really has to do with two questions. One is the question of free will and respecting the laws of the universe, which include free will as a fundamental law of humanity and part of the divine plan. But also it's to do with not looking to a lesser power when those lesser powers fall under an even greater power, which is the power of God, the power of the highest divinity. And that seems to be the crux of separating certain forms of divination from others. So we have in this prohibition nothing to do with obedience to God or anything like this, but quite the contrary. It is about being free from the power of gods and supernatural forces, which might otherwise oppress us by determining our destiny in ways that go against our free choice. So as I said, recently I've been reading a lot about Norse religion, Norse paganism, and also things to do with the paganism of the Roman world before Christianity became the dominant religion. And there is this strong emphasis on fate and destiny. You think of the Norns in Norse mythology, you think of the three fates in Greek mythology, and tied up in this whole pagan worldview, this whole pagan cosmology, was this idea that the gods determined our destiny and everything is in the hands of the gods, and we cannot but play out the fate or the destiny that is put before us. There was nothing like an idea of free will or individual human agency or individual choice based on conscience, which emerged later with the Stoics, and arguably even earlier than that in the story of Elijah and the still small voice. It was all about fate and destiny. And of course, from this we get the expression of fatalism, a type of a worldview where we don't take the initiative to change our situation because we think an outcome is inevitable, because there's no way that we can possibly overcome the circumstances of our life. That's fatalism. A complete abrogation of our individual agency based on this view of the universe. And that's what this kind of pagan worldview is doing in comparison to something like the Christian worldview that later emerged. But there were echoes of it in Judaism as well, and in Israelite religion. And I think what the crux of it is that we shouldn't consult oracles in a way where we are surrendering our agency, where we are surrendering our free will. That is a violation of our purpose and a violation of the divine order. And, we can see this in the idea of the covenant. So, in the story of Exodus and even Genesis, you could say, there is this unique idea of the covenant between God and God's people. A covenant is, makes you think of like a business contract between somebody engaging a service and somebody providing it. It also makes you think of a marriage contract as a form of covenant, to have a mutual relationship through life for the benefit of both parties. And of course, that relationship is one of consent. You know, two parties coming together to form one family as consenting adults. And so what is key in this idea of a valid contract, a valid covenant, is that the parties must both be willing and consenting. And so it's very much based in an idea of agency, rather than just being subject to the gods because they are the gods. And so when we engage in certain types of divination, or let's say divination in a certain kind of, with a certain kind of spiritual attitude that we bring to that, then we risk missing the mark of walking in truth in two separate ways. One is by denying or abrogating too much of our free will. And the second way is by not acknowledging the true origin point of our destiny and what determines our destiny, which is not the stars. The buck does not stop there. And it's not the forces of nature or the gods or anything like that. That is all stuff that inhabits the lower heavens. But there is a power higher than that, which is the highest levels of divinity, at the very top of the tree of life, in the supernal realm, in the pleroma, to use the language of the Gnostics. And that is the thing that ultimately is where the buck stops in terms of determining our destiny. And this was kind of an argument that emerged. Jewish rabbis were debating whether or not astrology was something that was forbidden by God. There were many ancient Jewish sages who did practice astrology, and others who thought it was forbidden. And essentially the ones who said that it was not forbidden were saying that they acknowledged that the stars have some influence over our destiny, and we can understand part of God's design, part of God's creation by understanding that. We can use that to get insight into our destiny, but ultimately we look to God and no other lower power as the thing that will determine our fate. Honouring the true power that moves the universe rather than the lower inferior powers is the crux of the argument. And indeed, why wouldn't you do that when appealing to one gives you the benefit of free choice and agency and mutual exchange between two consenting parties, while the other kind of method of appealing to a power is appealing to a power which you are subject to, which doesn't respect your free will and just subjects you to the powers of fate. And of course, when we fill ourselves with the spirit of the highest divine, we are able to change our fate, precisely because that power is more powerful than the stars. And this was the thing that the ancient Gnostics recognized. And that is why they went to great lengths to reawaken that divine spark and look beyond the planetary heavens towards the pleroma. And, you know, the astrologers that you meet who truly understand their craft will all tell you that when you read a birth chart or something like that, what you're seeing is not what is set in stone for your future. It is simply the dominant influences on your personality. And you can do with that what you will. You can spend your whole life fighting against them. You might feel like you're swimming upstream by doing that, but theoretically you can use your free will to do that. But what it's really about is not what you will do in the future, but what your strengths and weaknesses are, and how you can navigate your life, keeping that in mind, to create the most suitable possible future for you, where success comes most easily to you when you pursue your goals. And all of these pagan sort of forms of divination, whether it's the mediums who consult familiar spirits or ghosts of people who had passed, or auguries or other forms of reading signs and omens which appealed to the authority of the pagan gods, we have a common denominator, a common theme throughout in terms of what is at the core of why some forms of divination or some approaches to divination are not desirable. And so this is important because it's not that I think something like tarot or even astrology is inherently bad or sinful, according to a biblical view, as is commonly assumed with all of the sort of Bible thumping evangelicals that you see on TV. But rather it's about how you use those tools. Are you using it to give away your free will to some other power, or aren't you? Or are you respecting your free will and respecting the highest divine as you use those tools? And fatalism, it's not just something that affects divination and it can lead us astray when we're practicing divination. It is an attitude that can lead us astray in other areas in our life as well. I mean, how many people are there in today's society who refuse to take accountability for their actions because they claim that there is some external force that is putting them at such a disadvantage that when they do things that are evil, it's not actually their fault. It's society's fault, or it's white men's fault, or whatever it is. This is just another example of fatalism and a refusal to actually take personal responsibility and use our agency, our God-given agency. So it can be very dangerous indeed, because a society full of people who don't take personal responsibility is a society where people act in a way that is dangerous because they don't have any regard for the consequences of their actions, because they think that they are free from responsibility. So there is a deeper moral lesson in why perhaps certain forms of divination were prohibited in the first 5 books of the Bible, which represent a broader wisdom teaching than simply dogmas of one of the main monotheistic religions. And then on the other hand, we can use divination wisely and in a way that is for the highest good. And I hope that I've demonstrated that tonight as well. In the same way that we can use science to understand the created universe, to better understand the mind of God, we might use divination with the same intent. So those are my further thoughts on divination and how divination is dealt with within Scripture, and why Scripture's position on divination might be a surprisingly nuanced one. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to this channel to support my work, and if you want to support me further, please hit join or thanks down below. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.